Hello, I'm Electa Tritsch, and this is Tracks in Time. Come with me exploring some of the most intriguing and venerable landscapes in Massachusetts. Today, we'll be joined by Cherrie Corey.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Great day for a walk. Beautiful spring.
Indeed. Cherrie is a well-known local educator, naturalist, brilliant photographer, and someone with a very intimate knowledge of the place we're exploring today. Join us as we venture into Estabrook country.
Estabrook Woods is an extraordinary tract of land. Over 1,200 acres, with many owners, have been protected here, from Harvard's 600-acre field station to private estates, the Middlesex School, the town of Concord. It is a place open to the public for passive recreation. Before now, Indians had used this land for millennia, making trails, finding food, honoring the special environment. Early on, these were useful outlands for Concord settlers. And by 1700, a few borderlanders actually made homes here, but the settlement didn't last long. Estabrook country was essentially uninhabited after the Revolution.
But really the settlement period was just a prelude to what happened after that in some ways, wasn't it, Cherrie? Estabrook has been many things to many people since then.
Yes, it has. Thoreau came on the scene in the early to mid 1800s. So Estabrook's fame has unfolded largely because of Thoreau's deep musings and very deep observations and record keeping of this extensive landscape. Let me read to you one of his journal entries about Estabrook. Going along this Old Carlisle Road for walkers, for berry pickers, and no more worldly travelers. Not for the sheriff, nor butcher, nor the baker's jingling car. Road where all wild things and fruits abound, where there are countless rocks to jar those who venture there in wagons. After Thoreau's death, many others picked up the mantle of Estabrook explorations and musings, including William Ellery Channing, Emerson, and others of that day. Later on, Herbert Gleason, who was fond of revisiting Thoreau's favorite places with his camera, took many pictures in the area. And since then, more recently, Harvard University became interested in Estabrook country because it was one of the largest, really the largest tract of uninterrupted landscape that still had its original colonial character.
You don't have to go far into Estabrook Woods to begin feeling the sense of the history that's here. The road cut down through the banks, the stone walls, or the remnants of stone walls on both sides, are indications both of long use and also of the importance of this road in the bigger scheme of things. It was the road between Carlisle and Concord, or Carlisle and North and Concord.
And along this road marched the Minutemen of northern towns to support the resistance at Concord's North Bridge.
One of the ways you can measure a colonial road significance is by pacing off the distance between one stone wall and the other, because that's the indication of the public right-of-way that this road cut through. My pace is unpredictable, but we'll see what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus some. 5 or 6 is 18 feet. Basically, it's the width of one rod of a surveyor's measure. And a one-rod road was a good-sized road. It wasn't a highway, a king's highway by any means.
It's a little hard to believe when you look at this part of the road that anyone ever brought a wagon or any kind of a wheeled conveyance over it. The large bedrock sticking out of the center would suggest that travel's impossible except by a sturdy horse or on foot. This strange dent in the hillside is likely what has been called a borrow pit, where the men from Concord and possibly Carlisle who worked on the road would come and dig out gravel and stones from the hillside to fill in the roadway.
One of the very interesting things about the landscape is that it represents nearly every kind of habitat of the common New England landscape, from all of the wetland types, vernal pools, streams, ponds, marshes, even bogs, to upland forest, lowland forest, open field, and aging orchards. This is one of the many vernal pools that is in Estabrook Woods. The vernal pools come in the spring, and many of these small woodland ones will be dry by the summer, but they are the place that the wood frogs and many of the salamanders that live here lay their eggs and raise their young. Wood frogs in particular choose vernal pools, as do some of the smaller salamanders.
Wood frogs have to be one of the strangest sounding creatures I've ever heard.
We've come to Mink Pond, as it's currently called. Was called what before?
Stump Pond, prior
Pond.
to Mink Pond, was the local name for it.
And I know that in the 17th century, it was the Oak Meadow lot.
It was a wet meadow, so the meadow hay they harvested here was a special kind of grass that likes to grow with its feet wet. But on the edges of the Oak Meadow lot, there was always sphagnum moss with a lot of cranberries growing. So we think that the early colonists also were coming here to collect cranberries. There is a very large beaver lodge on the other shore. That was the first place that anyone ever filmed the inside of an active lodge.
As we walk along the Estabrook Road, it may be a little hard to believe, but what we're looking at are the remains of a lime kiln. It may be as old as the late 1600s. It certainly was used after that to process the lime stone that we will see the quarries for just up the road. What's left of the Concord lime kiln is something you need to use a great deal of imagination for to understand. It might be helpful to look at a reconstructed lime kiln that exists in Bolton. The kiln was a round structure built into a steep slope. Chunks of limestone quarried nearby were dumped in at the top, mixed with charcoal. As the mixture burned, the stone was reduced to powdered lime, useful for plaster, as a soil sweetener, and commercially as a flux in iron smelting. A bit farther on, we come to the skeletal lime quarries. We're seeing what's left. This is a dike of another stone that cut through the limestone deposit. Early spring does not show them at their best, but in summer you can see the richness of plant life that surrounds the quarry, encouraged by that slight bit more alkalinity than would be found in what otherwise is mostly an oak and pine forest. Part of what you find along any path in the woods is signs of seasons past, not just the seasons to come. This is one of many pine trees that was bent and finally broken by a major storm. Looking more closely, you see the domino effect of these events, with one tree catching in the tops of another smaller, more fragile one and bringing that one down as well. But there's an upside to this When a group of pines or even one large shading pine comes down, it opens up a space for the sun to get into the understory and provides a new white pine nursery along the floor. Some of these young pines will survive and turn into the next generation of the tall trees all around us. And another sign of seasons past in the woods is the shredding that has gone on, probably this winter, on this old rotten trunk. Raccoons, possum, fish or cat, looking for grubs. They do a good job of disintegrating what rain and age have not already gotten rid of. They're not indulging in wishful thinking to think that something might be here that they might eat. If you look in the pieces of wood, you can see holes of insects who have gone before. And there probably were some yummy grubs sitting in there, waiting to feed them in the starving time. The stone that is defining this landscape, it's extraordinary because it's defined this landscape for, 300 years now? More than 300 years. They're a document of the history of one family settling on the outskirts of Concord civilization. Thomas Estabrook is known to have lived here by 1683. He and his wife raised a family here. And a lot of the walls you're seeing here are animal pens for their livestock. We're standing now looking up at what looks like sort of a strange ledge with stone wall behind it. The Estabrook cellar hole. The ledge that we thought was a ledge is in fact the dirt that was dug out of the ground and dumped on the downside of this hill to make it a little easier to dig a foundation by hand. Like most rural colonial cellar holes, the cellar itself was only under part of the building. It was enough to provide storage in the winter. And to the northern side, this platform, as it appears, is the base for the chimney of the house. And all around this is another enclosure of stone walls, defining the house lot, keeping the cattle out of it, suggesting at least to the chickens that they should stay in. Of course, no self-respecting farmer would do something for just one purpose when he could do it for two. You managed to build a lot boundary with the stones, but of course you were clearing the land at the same time. This is a hillside that many people would have thought more than twice before they decided to settle on. It is not friendly environment. The road continues, not too much farther, and if you were to continue on it, you'd end up in what is now Carlisle, and pretty much the end of Estabrook country. You can access it from the Carlisle end. You can access it from a couple of different places, including the Malcolm Preserve in Carlisle, which will take you via Two Rod Road down to Punkatasset Hill in Concord. But we've come to the end of Tracks in Time for today. Another time, we'll pick up where we're leaving off and see what else we find in Estabrook country.